What's going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Guys, we are less than 1 week away from Indianapolis Colts football, guys. It feels amazing. Feels like the beginning of almost like Christmas break, like you got the 1 week before the big day, and then you're going to be gone for a while, and it just feels like everything is right and normal again, right? Feels like you're going to be able to relax and have some good times with some good friends, some good football, things of that nature. It'll be the first Sunday with football, and it'll be the last Sunday without football last Sunday with football until February. So we get football for a long time, ladies and gentlemen. I cannot wait for this week to finally get here, but I wanted to do a little bit of a different video here. We probably have hit on this somewhat similar to kind of a, talking about some Colts that are impressed by us or we are impressed by. But nevertheless, I wanted to kind of make sure that we did a video on most improved Colts for the 2022 season. So there could be a lot of different ways to approach this, guys. So let me know in the comments what you think about these particular individuals and if you would have potentially added somebody different. I'm always open to hearing more arguments about that. But first player I wanted to mention, and he was not part of the Indianapolis Colts in 2021, but I think that from a statistical standpoint, I think that this argument, this topic alone is worth the debate on this player. So I'm going to go with Matt Ryan. So I know, again, Matt Ryan was not an Indianapolis Colt last year, but if you look at where Matt Ryan is now versus what he was looking like in 2021 with the Atlanta Falcons, right? I think most of us agree that Matt Ryan is going to have a statistically better year this year with Frank Reich as his head coach and with this Indianapolis Colts roster than what he previously had the last few years with Atlanta. Right? Went last year with 4,000 passing yards, had 20 touchdowns to 12 interceptions, right? I think that you can expect him to probably throw for another 4,000 this year, while in the meantime having around 30 touchdowns and being, around that same interception total. I think that you just look at his numbers and you can see the numbers skyrocketing this year quite a bit. Not for the fact that Indianapolis has a ton more talent than Atlanta offensively, even though we know they do. Obviously, you got John. It's just the way the Colts run their team, right? Statistic from a roster standpoint, this Indianapolis Colts team is much better. Obviously, defensive wise, Matt Ryan's going to be able to not feel like he's under pressure as much. Defensively, they're going to get the ball to the offense a lot more. Matt Ryan has a few more consistent weapons to throw the football to. Michael Pittman is right up there with some of the better wide receivers in the league at this point. At least we think from a statistical point, Michael Pittman could be reaching almost 100 receptions this year. And then obviously with the acquisition of Alec Pierce in the draft, and you're hoping Paris Campbell sticks around, that could be some better weapons, more consistent weapons for him to utilize. And then obviously the running backs that you have with Jonathan Taylor and Nahim Hines, both running backs that you can throw the football to out of the backfield. And even though the tight ends for this unit are not as talented as what you would see in a Kyle Pitts, at the end of the day, the tight ends are still serviceable. You can still do some things with them. But in the end of the day, I think Matt Ryan is going to be more of a consistent passer this year than what he used to be in the last few years when he was having to do everything for Atlanta, right? He's going to be a more consistent and efficient passer. So I think that's where this argument comes into play, is that he's going to be one of the more improved players, not just for the Colts, but just like in general, when you look at stats. But now let's go into the first Indianapolis Colt who will have a better season. And I'm going to go with Nahim Hines. I think this one everyone kind of agrees with, because even the head coach, Frank Reich, has been mentioning that if I were a fantasy owner, I'd have Nahim Hines. So when you hear that, you hear them say, oh, well, we're definitely going to make sure we get him the ball. this year for sure. I mean, when you look back at his season in 2020 with Phillip Rivers, you saw he was one of the more efficient running backs out of the backfield, had 4 touchdowns that year, receiving touchdowns, and over 400 yards. So at the end of the day, you know that this guy can do some damage out of the backfield. And I think that's what we're going to see similar to that this season with Nahim Hines, because you now have a quarterback in Matt Ryan who is more efficient at getting the ball to Nahim Hines in that situation. So overall, Nahim Hines, number 2 running back, he's going to get a few runs. He's going to definitely get a lot of catches out of the backfield or even lined up in the slot because of his ability to get open. So no question about it, Nahim Hines is going to have a drastically better season statistically than what we saw in this last season in 2021. Now, this one right here, I could have went a couple different directions with this, and, you know, there might have been some other offensive guys you could mention. Like, I was potentially going to go with Michael Pittman here, but in regards to the improvement of Michael Pittman, I mean, I understand why you would say he's going to improve statistically and in a more team sense. I understand where you could go with that, but and Pittman's already number 1. So I know that he's going to improve regardless with Matt Ryan now as the quarterback. So I went with the default option here, and I went with tight end Mohale Cox. So the tight end situation, obviously, it's still in a situation where the Colts really only have 3 right now, and it doesn't sound like Jelani Woods is going to get much time at the moment to start the season. But when you look at what Mohale Cox had last year and 24 catches for 316 yards and 4 touchdowns, right? Like, with Jack Doyle now gone, you know, you look for Mohale Cox to maybe do more in the receiving end of things now that he is truly and inevitably the number 1 tight end. Matt Ryan's a very tight end friendly quarterback. And now that Jack Doyle is gone, Mohale Cox is going to take the reign there. So, I mean, I would not be shocked if Mohale Cox's stats increase by almost like 50, 60, maybe even 70%. I mean, that's very logical that will happen because only 24 catches for 316 yards. I mean, Mohale Cox, I would not be surprised if we saw him jump above his 2020 stats, which was 31 catches for 400 yards. I could easily see Mohale Cox getting 40, maybe 50 catches this year. I don't know if I quite go 50, maybe a little under 50, but, you know, the idea of him getting 500 yards in this system, it seems very logical. And getting around those 4 to 5 touchdowns sounds like something very logical for somebody like Mohale Cox because of his skill set and how Matt Ryan will probably end up using him. So look for Mohale Cox to take a giant step in the direction that we want to see statistically, even though we know he's not an elite tight end prospect. The way the Colts will use him is probably going to get him involved a little bit more than what we saw in 2021. So, but let's go into some defensive players real quick. And I wanted to say the first one will be Kwity Paye. And I think this one was pretty easy for a lot of people's sake. You know, Kwity Paye ended last season with 4 sacks on the season, and most of those coming late in the year. So you saw him flip a switch on a little bit at the end, but you saw what he could potentially do at the end. And now we're hearing over the offseason that he played most of the year with limited vision in one of his eyes. And you know, when you're a defensive end and you're trying to blitz the quarterback and your vision in one eye is not as good as the other, then that can impact your perception on things and how you react. So with him now having much better vision and having a second year to learn under these guys and learn from guys like Yannick Ngakoue, and knowing that Yannick Ngakoue is going to garner most of the attention on the other side of the offense or the defensive line, Kwity Paye is in a prime position to improve drastically from his sack total and overall pressure percentage. So, people have been saying, he could potentially double his sacks from last season. And as long as he stays healthy, I firmly believe that is a possibility. I said, around 7 sacks this year, which would definitely be a great improvement from 4. 8 is definitely not out of the question. So Kwity Paye definitely is a guy that I think could drastically improve this season versus what we saw in 2021. And another player that I think that you could make an argument as to maybe this isn't somebody you would put in this category, but I'm going to do it anyway. And that is Julian Blackman, the free safety. So I know he got hurt last year, and that's why the numbers didn't perform very well for what we saw. But at the end of the day, we also didn't see him really get as much in the fumble and interception category as what we saw his rookie year, right? When he was a rookie, I mean, he had 4 forced turnovers, and not only turnovers, but those turnovers were basically like they were game-changing turnovers and the game-ending turnovers, most of them. So, Julian Blackman getting back to full strength and being on the field now, I hope with this new system, Julian Blackman can go back to what we saw in his rookie year when he was making those big time interceptions and forcing fumbles, in big situations. I want to see Julian Blackman get more involved in this defense. And I even think from a tackle perspective, I mean, he only had 42 tackles his rookie year. So it's not like Julian Blackman was big in the tackling department. I want to just continue to see Julian Blackman get more involved. And I think with this defense, allowing him to be more aggressive, I think is going to give him the opportunity to jump those stats tenfold. So those are the 5 guys that I mentioned could be the most improved Colts for the 2022 season. Let me know what you guys think of this list. Is there people that you agree with, disagree with, guys that you could have added or something like that? But let me know what you guys think. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, guys, go Colts.